Good, mate. How are you going?
Good, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to talk to you again because after our last conversation last week, I happened to listen to Philosophize This podcast. Stephen West, I think his name is, or what is it? I forget. Anyway, he's a great podcaster. I was listening to him from the beginning when he first launched his Philosophize This podcast, and I've always enjoyed the way he communicates. He tells the story. He manages to get a lot of information about, you know, complex thinkers, philosophers into a short period of time and make it engaging, make it kind of pedestrian, easy to connect with. So, yeah, just real quick, I'll just introduce the audience to what we're talking about. So, Byung-Chul Han is a German philosopher who was born in Korea. He's a Korean-German philosopher. And he's written a couple of books. One is called Psychopolitics, Neoliberalism and the New Technologies of Power, which I haven't read, and The Burnout Society, which I haven't read, but they seem very interesting. So his idea is based on the comments about the book. He constantly seeking to optimize and improve mental acuity, striving constantly is never enough. Anxiety leads to production. So that's psychopolitics. And I think of this in kind of a way that where power works in mysterious ways. You know how they say that God works in mysterious ways? Well,
Yeah.
power is this invisible, ineffable force as well that works on all of us in mysterious ways. And culture, is the hard problem. Like consciousness is the hard problem. Changing culture, affecting culture, having some agency within your culture, that's really hard, right? Because we kind of inherit
Yeah.
our cultures. So the second book is called The Burnout Society. So our competitive, service-oriented societies are taking a toll on the late modern individual. Rather than improving life, multitasking, user-friendly technology, and the culture of convenience are producing disorders that range from depression to attention deficit disorder to borderline personality disorder. So he talks about that. And then there's this other concept that was in the podcast called the panopticon that he deals with. So he's talking about freedom as a form of control, negative power versus positive power. And so negative power is saying you should do something, and positive power is saying you can do something. You can do anything, the self-help.
Yeah.
Thing. So Bentham, he created this idea of the panopticon, which is the perfect prison that would be structured in such a way as that cells would be open to a central tower. In the model, individuals in the cells do not interact with each other and are constantly confronted by the panoptic tower. So they can all see each other, what they're doing, but they can't interact with one another really on a deep level. So, and the internet and social media is a lot like that. So I was thinking about hyperachievement, hyper-competitiveness, hyper-productivity, and all that kind of stuff. And the Philosophize This podcast was saying that this leads to toxic narcissism. And it all just made so much sense to me, the whole thing. The other thing about it is this neoliberalism thing that I've talked about a lot in my videos and whatnot. So, the market, free market, open market, no price controls, deregulated capital markets, lowering trade barriers, all that kind of stuff. So I got this quote: neoliberal ideology is linked to poor collective health and well-being. At the individual level, however, neoliberal beliefs may actually promote self-efficacy, self-esteem, and self-reliance. So then the other thing is he talks about the other, but not othering people, but the other, being curious about the other. We were talking about that in our discussion, that you have to look outside and empathize and try to connect. And then he also talks about the terror of the same. And this is pretty interesting for me because I'll just finish in a sec. But over the years traveling around and living in different countries, I've noticed the Americanization of the world. So I've noticed how in business, in finance, in culture, there's an incredible Americanization that goes on almost invisibly because people are exposed to American culture in so many ways. And in particular, well, it's always been like that with music and culture, going back to jazz or the blues or rock and roll or, whatever, and fashion trends and so on. But these days it's more because you have the same business models. You have the same ways of managing things, same ways of doing things, financing things. Global capital is a thing and it runs the whole show. And there's no borders, no limits. So business really has kind of co-opted government and all that kind of thing. So then we're convinced that we have to be better, stronger, smarter. We have to consume more information. We have to be more intelligent. We are constantly improving. You see all these things like Atomic Habits by James Clear and things like that, where you're constantly optimizing yourself, improving yourself because you have to be competitive. You have to win, otherwise you're worthless, you're nothing. And this leads to a kind of shallowness where suddenly you're like, everything's just so shallow and you've commodified yourself. You've turned yourself into a commodity. You're propagandizing to yourself. You're not really connecting with other people. So the whole concept of a collective, a culture in which people have time to deeply consider and think about things and do other things besides try to, be the best they can be. It reminds me of like I said before, in the NFL or in any professional sport, you have hyper competitive, amazing athletes, and there's a million of them just waiting in the wings to take your part. And in filmmaking, if I want to make a film with a budget of $5 million, I need movie stars. Not any great actor that I could find anywhere who's excellent and up to the demands of the part. But I'd need to have somebody that was a commodity, somebody that would sell tickets, somebody that could bring the money, investors' money back.
The draw card, yeah.
Whereas if I invest $50,000, it doesn't matter because I can find ways to make that money back and give my investors $1,000 return on investment or something like that.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was so. We were talking about these kinds of things a lot. So what do you think about that kind of stuff in your?
I was relating a lot to some of the things that were being said, but I'm questioning it though. I saw the habits thing. We all like to. What's the top 5 habits of the most successful people in the world? And you don't get up at 3:05 a.m. and you don't put your left sock on first and your right shoe on next. So this is why you fail. So some of that is shoved down our throat, but I think it's more advertising and propaganda. I don't know if people in general take it that seriously, consciously. But I think in the subconscious, we do. We're constantly questioning ourselves. Because over time, it's not those individual top 5 habits of the most successful. It's that whole conversation of always wanting to know what successful people do. And a lot of their so-called habits have nothing to do with their success, probably got everything to do with their individual personalities. But just because they get up at 5:01 every morning and they do 30 minutes of exercise, I don't know if that's the reason for their success. It might be something that they just do. So it does, in a way, it's almost contradictory that we want to be like someone else in order to be the best of ourselves. So there's a contradiction there, or something that's just challenging my mind. But I also wonder how much of this is, you go back to, the days of Edward Bernays at the start of the 20th century, and I think that that's probably where a lot of this started, is that he was the father of propaganda, I suppose, and he started to get into our psyche of, we can be better, we can be better. You're not good enough. You haven't got enough, and so that was well before social media. That was
sure. And that's the beginning of that kind of anxiety, right?
I think it's the foundation of it. I think that social media is the launch pad, whereas the foundation was built through decades in the 20th century, and come the late 90s, the internet, we're primed. We're primed for this turbocharge of. I remember saying, it was a few years ago now, but you scroll through Facebook or Instagram or something like this, and everyone's, well, not everyone, but so many of your friends are putting out positive vibes there, and I'm doing this for me, and time for me time, and all this sort of stuff. And I sort of made the observation that we've gone from what can I do to help to talking about what I do to help myself. And I think, and I think there's a toxic positivity that comes through. People are constantly outwardly projecting positive vibes when their life is shit. Their mum's dying of cancer, their kid's got autism, they're about to get kicked out of the house, and what do they post on Facebook? Something positive. Living my best life. And it's almost like you're not allowed to say, yeah, things are shit. I'm not good right now. And then we recently had Are You OK Day here in Australia, which is I don't know if it's worldwide, but it's in Australia, one day a year we have the Are You OK Day, and we promote the idea of asking someone, are you okay? How are you going? But I think that there's a body of research coming through now that it actually triggers people who are trying to maintain some stability in their life. If you ask them, are you okay? We're almost pressured to not be okay. Everyone's got to have a mental health issue. So this is the perverseness of it. We've gone from having to be the best ourselves, and now we've also got to be vulnerable as well. We're not good enough until we're vulnerable, and it's very confusing for someone like me. I'm trying to make sense of it. I'm sure that you are too, but it is all becoming about the self. How am I feeling? What can I do? I'm only going to do it if people see me do it, so that I can get some recognition for helping. Whereas I suppose growing up, we weren't bombarded with social media. I was one of the lucky ones that grew up in a generation without Facebook, so our mistakes weren't publicised worldwide, and we didn't have to. We had, the usual teenage angst growing up, and the peer pressure and all that sort of stuff. But I think social media has amplified it, and so not only is there so much more to be concerned about, but it's changing almost daily or yearly. The trend, I've got to be this now, I've got to be that now. But I think going back to that main point, it is all about me, and what can I project.
The toxic narcissism, and then we get Donald Trump as president, right? So it kind of
Yeah,
makes
which is
sense.
just a mirror. He's almost a mirror on it. But yeah, um, I've just lost my train of thought for a second there. But it's all about me and how I feel and my brand is what I was going to say. Is we now talk in terms of our personal brand,
Yeah,
and you only have to go onto Seek or something like that. There's hundreds of channels out there and websites and everything you can do to prepare for interviews for your job, to sell your brand. You know, look on LinkedIn. I jokingly say that Facebook is where people lie about their lives, and LinkedIn is where people lie about their work.
right.
And everyone, some of the job descriptions on there, I do not even know what any of it means, but that people have worked out ways of making very convoluted descriptions of what they do and talk about themselves in the third person. That's
My
and that
bio.
is, yeah, Mick is a inspirational thought leader. What the fuck,
Yeah.
you know? And that's on their personal LinkedIn. So yeah, that drive for success. LinkedIn has become the social media. It's become the Facebook of professionalism, I suppose, or the professional sphere, where everyone's jockeying to say how proud they were today to have their company's brand on TV or something like this. And you go, the company can celebrate that itself, but now we're expected to project how successful we are within our own company, and we're all happy in our own company. I've never really seen on LinkedIn anyone say, what a shit place this is, because we've got to project this positivity all the time, and we're selling something. And I, I don't even think you could call it a conspiracy, but it's almost like all the employers got together to create LinkedIn so they get lots of free advertising from people that work for them.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
yeah. But it's all about that connection that individuals have.
yeah, it's a complete how would you say, I don't know, cultural ecosystem or whatever it is. But somehow it evolved, like you say, over many decades. And through technology, which Han comments on technology a lot. And we get to this point where we've been convinced that we can do anything, that there are no limits, and it's all up to us. So if you got a virus, it's your fault because you're not healthy enough, blah blah blah. And if you're not making enough money, it's your fault because you didn't try to improve yourself, you didn't work hard enough, and all this kind of thing. And pretty soon you don't have a chance to really get out of the sameness of that treadmill and look for something new and challenging that you can engage with deeply and contemplate deeply and think about deeply and really develop something in your heart and soul and mind that's meaningful in a unique way. Instead it's all about my bubble, everybody's the same, I just want confirmation of my beliefs, and I'm not willing to really go out of my way to try to understand anybody else. And when you travel, it's all Airbnb, and it's all like the whole differences of cultures has been washed away through business, basically through just transactional relationships all the way down, so that now all your friendships and acquaintanceships are all transactional, your LinkedIn friends, your Facebook friends. And you really literally don't have time anymore because you're so busy working on yourself to actually listen to somebody deeply and empathize with them and understand that they're different and appreciating those differences. My dad, said to me, you have to embrace and learn to appreciate difference. It's really one of the most important things in your life. And also, I remember when I was traveling in the early 80s in Greece, and I met this group of German people, and I was hanging out with them for a while, and they came up with a nickname for me. They called me Sonny Boy. And they used to lightly tease me and kind of about being so positive and optimistic and confident, because I was a young American kid. So it's like, yeah, why do you climb a mountain? Because it's there, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And they were saying, Sonny Boy, you don't understand anything, because life is not like that. And if you can't, understand that it's not all good, you're never going to feel anything. So, and it's interesting that when you get older, when you do mature, like he mentioned in that podcast, you recognize these things, right? Life's getting shorter, you're getting older, you've learned a few things over your life, and you're less, hopefully you mature beyond the bravado and the overconfidence and the narcissism. But today, when there's so much pressure on children, young people, from day one, to have those perfect Instagram photos and to present themselves as this incredible human being who's learning every day and growing all the time and getting every day in every way, I'm getting better and better. And, and it's all becomes a big performance of yourself that you're presenting to the world, and you're seeing back all their performances, and none of it's authentic. So,
yeah,
I
do you think just do you think this is where a lot of identity politics has sprung from as well? And this has been mulling around in my head, and it's a bit hard for me to articulate, but yes, we're now developing a culture, or have developed a culture, where all of us must succeed. Now, there are some people who are at genuine disadvantage, and there are many others who are at perceived disadvantage or confected disadvantage. So now they're creating excuses as to why they can't succeed. So now we have to rally around them to and specifically do things for those groups, that group, to get equality of outcome rather than equality of opportunity. The next step is the outcome. So it's almost like, oh yeah, I've got to self-improve, but I don't want to do the work. I want a shortcut. I remember saying in our conversation last week about how you've done this research and you've read the books, and I come to you and say, just tell me, what do I need to know? And you say, well, you've got to read this, and you've got to do that, you've got to, and I go, oh, I don't want to do the work. I just want to, I think that's where we're developing that excuse mentality as well. I want a shortcut to success. I don't want to have to do that work.
Right.
I want to, because self-improvement is a process, and it's an evolution, and it takes time. A bit like, I've been riding a bike for 2 years, and I'm still, I would call myself a beginner level almost, but incrementally, I've made great progress. I couldn't just buy the bike and then be fit because I outlaid the money. Therefore, I should be fit now. I'm a cyclist. A lot of people do want that instant success, and they see apparent overnight successes on Instagram. These so-called influencers, they see people trip over success, and they feel like failures because they weren't able to have instant success as well. And I suppose all of us have felt it at some time through our lives. I mean, I'm 50, and I'm looking at the age of we've got a new premier in Victoria and here in Australia, and she's 50, or just a bit older than 50, and I'm thinking, all these people have done these amazing things by the time they're 50, led a country and been president, and what am I doing? But can you imagine turbocharging that with daily dose of looking at Instagram, looking at LinkedIn or whatever, and looking at your failure index,
Right.
constantly having to compare yourself against what others did, and you're not them, and you don't
Well,
know
that's because of
their
this
background.
illusion that Han
Yeah,
is talking about this can-do thing, you know.
but we're
So
fed it from
the
a
negative
lot of
power would say that you should. Also, this comes from the postmodern critique of power, right? So what you're
yeah,
talking about a little bit is how we blame power, powerful things, powerful in our
yeah.
lives for our problems and victimhood, when in reality, it's this invisible, omnipresent, omniscient power of corporate capitalism that's just literally entered into every aspect of our lives constantly through a
Yeah.
stream of information, and it never lets up. And so you feel the pressure. This is where you get the anxiety from, the toxic narcissism. You feel this pressure to conform to this game, and to, you know, play it as long as you live, to the point where you're going to borrow money and put yourself in debt just to have things and do things that make you seem to be successful in this cliche kind of model
But
aspect.
I don't think it's everybody. I also think that there
Oh,
is
of course.
another class of people who are doing the complete opposite. They're going, this is all too hard, I'm giving up. We
Right.
have a generation now in Australia who have just decided by the age of 21 or 22, they have just accepted that they will never own a house.
Right.
And so they're bucking the system, and they're going off and going, you know what, I'm not going to spend 50-60% of my salary on a mortgage. I'm going to spend it on holidaying and experiences and things like that, because the system isn't built for me, so I've got to make my own way. And
And they
then
might
there's
be pretty right about that in some ways, but that's a broader and conversation about the whole socioeconomics and political, you know, aspect of all this, which is
but it
highly
does go to,
complex.
I suppose that in a way it agrees with the premise, because it's like, well, I'm not going to win in your game, so I'm going to create my own game, and I'm going to win at my own game because it's about me.
Sure. Well, that's true too. I mean, you can lower the basket, you know, if you're not tall enough, and dunk a lot of balls. And you know, is that really what it's all about? So there are constraints in life. There are
Yeah.
limitations, right? And you have to come to terms with those things. Otherwise, you know, you're going to be confused. But with this constant pressure to compare and contrast your fake self with everybody else's fake self, you might really want to drop out and just go and do something else, or create something new. I don't know. But anyway, I'm gonna.
There's two problems there.
Yeah.
One is you don't figure it out until you're yours or my age that it was all
Yeah,
bullshit.
exactly.
And two, we can't convince the younger generation to learn from our experience. It's all bullshit. So they've
Right,
all got to
that's
go through
true.
it.
You become a little bit cynical about everything, and kind of give up. Anyway, I'm gonna have to cut it off here, Mick. But I appreciate your thoughts. I had a feeling you would have a lot to say about this type of stuff. It's a long, complicated conversation. You could talk about this. I think this Han
It
guy,
is.
he could do 5 or 6 podcasts on that one guy.
Well, I like I said, these are just my initial thoughts after a few days of contemplating and re-listening and reading up a little bit more on the particular. His name just escapes me for a second. Bun Yang, to look at some of his work, but it is definitely resonates, and it's definitely worth drilling down into, and I'd recommend anyone.
They're short books, so I'm going to read one because they're short. So anyway, buddy, let's talk again next week. I've got to go now, and I appreciate your time.
Sounds good. Thanks, mate.
All right, buddy. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Beats and rhymes, putting lines on a paper chase. Never stops when we got a whole lot of things to say. These are a couple few things floating down my brain. Make way for the end of these times. The end of these times. These times that we take for granted. The end of these times. These times that we take for granted. We're two men with music at Kilman. Use it to be superhuman powers. Fight off the cowards, haters, they get devoured. My car's better than yours is, even though I don't have one. You drive Porsches, hit them with a catapult out of my fortress. Painted a portrait, results are gorgeous. I'm a sentimental sort with morbid habits. Savage, killing rappers' parents. Send them back to the home for average orphans. Often locking them out cause they lack the clearance. When they're in the foster home, we come knocking. Kick doors in, steal organs for profit. Sell them to the black market. Make a fortune with portions of the proceeds in my pockets. You wanna snitch, I'll find a lake, put you under it. Never telling anybody the coordinates. Tell a bitch Aquaman don't give a shit. We gonna be running this till we're done with it. Steady wondering why the people with intelligence never quite make it in the government. I'm an excellent candidate, but abandoning the thought. I'm better at making speakers move what's in front of them. Beats and rhymes, putting lines on a paper chase. Never stops when we got a